Welcome, everyone, to the Asset Mindset. We're excited for this episode. Today we have on a special guest, Joe Wells. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. Um, Joe is a flipper. He started in Utah and now he's flipping in Pensacola, Florida. We actually came into contact with him by doing a deal out there in Florida, and I know Jordan's known him for quite some time. But Jordan, how you doing, man? How was last week?
It's good. Um, just hustling away. We've started to look at a couple more deals out in Utah. We called on one that we're looking to do some creative finance on, so that's exciting. And we're always looking out in Florida where our man Joe is. So hopefully we can start partnering up on some deals with him. So
Yeah, that'd be sweet. So, Joe, I know you. Obviously, Jordan knows a little bit more about you. I know you. Sounds like you grew up in Utah and then made the move out to Florida. Is that correct?
Yep. Grew up in Draper, Utah, and now in Pensacola, Florida.
Right on. Well, just walk us through high school, college. Know you went on a mission. Eventually, ended up in Florida. How did all that play out?
Yeah. Like I said, I grew up in Draper, Utah. Went to Corner Canyon High School. In high school, had no knowledge of real estate or anything like that. Just liked sports and friends, and that's about it. Graduated and went on a mission a few months later to Southern California. Was there for 2 years. Um, I came back and I hadn't thought anything about a career or anything like that. I thought maybe I wanted to be an engineer. There was this really cool member of my mission who was an engineer, so I got into BYU before my mission. Went to one engineering class and realized I wasn't smart enough for that. So switched to pre med because that sounded good on dates and stuff.
yeah,
And realized pretty quickly I wasn't very good at science classes either. I guess process of elimination, I started realizing I needed to figure out what I was going to do. And I met my wife a few weeks after I got home, and we were friends for a while before we started dating. And then when we started dating, her family was into real estate. She has her dad and brother build houses, and I guess she has two brothers who have built houses. And they had the real estate bug, right? They loved it, and every time I spent time with them, they would talk to me about it. And the more I looked into it, the more it kind of made sense to me, and felt like maybe something I could be successful at. It penciled out on paper pretty easily in my brain, and so I thought, well, maybe this is the route for me to go. And my wife and I, when we decided to get married, started looking at properties in Utah, and we kept getting outbid with cash offers on houses that needed a lot of work and stuff like that. And it was a little bit of a frustrating process. We ended up getting a mobile home out there
wow.
and flipping that as our first property. And it went well, but I didn't want to be flipping mobile homes for the rest of my life just because our potential was limited there. So we kind of made a split decision a few months after we got married to move, to find somewhere where we could go, where it would be a little bit lower barrier of entry. And her brother was actually stationed in Mississippi with the Air Force. He told us how he loved vacationing in Pensacola, and we loved the beach. And we just kind of started looking into it. We looked at a few other markets, but we felt like Pensacola had a lot of potential. And there was obviously housing prices were a lot cheaper than Utah at the time, and still are. And so we felt like it was a place we could get our hands dirty. And we moved there without ever having stepped foot there. We bought a house sight unseen, our first flip. We lived in it, and it ended up working out. I'm glad it did. And I'm glad I married someone who was willing to kind of take that leap of faith with me, because it was definitely the first night we got out here. I remember thinking, what on earth have I done? This was maybe the
Yeah.
biggest mistake of my life. But
That's pretty cool
but
that you
it's
were
it's
able
worked out.
to have her super on board with you and like just be willing to be in the trenches with you. I mean, her coming from a real estate background probably helped, but that's
Yeah.
really neat that she was on board with you to just go out there and get after it. I'm curious, that first house that you guys bought out there, was it one that you guys were wanting to live in, and like, or I mean, obviously you're wanting to live in it, but was it one that you were flipping, or was it one like, hey, we're gonna live here and then we're gonna flip just around here? We're gonna start looking. This is a good place for us to start, planting roots, or was it like, hey, this is a good one to like get our first flip in here, and then we'll go find another one? What did that first house look like for you in that brand new market that you had no experience in?
Yeah. So we got there. Our original plan was we were going to live in that house and kind of flip, and our ultimate goal was to burr and obviously build our rental portfolio. We only plan on being out here about a year, and so our goal was to kind of come out here, get like 3 or 4 rentals, and go back to Utah. I was still in school, so we thought, man, we'll jump out there for a year and get back, and just kind of build as many rentals as we can. Well, when we got to the house, we quickly realized it was not in very good condition. It's not something we really wanted to live in, and we also realized it was actually a really good flip. So our first one kind of fell into our lap. We were like, well, instead of looking for another house to flip, why don't we just do the one we're living in? Which was a unique experience. It's a little daunting sometimes living where you're working. You wake up and see what your to-do list every day. But yeah, it ended up working out. So we lived in it, took about 3-4 months, fixed it up, made it look really good, and then we ended up moving and selling it. So kind of had to shift our plans a little bit, but it worked out for the better. So
That's really cool, man. My biggest question for you is, what have been the biggest differences that you've seen between the Utah market and like Pensacola, Florida? Like, I know me and Jordan talk a lot about this, the differences between Utah and other markets. And I also, the other day, talked with an investor, and he was just telling me like, yeah, in Utah you have to like hustle and grind to find a good deal, but outside of Utah you can just like go look on the MLS, and it's super easy. So I'm curious to see like what your thoughts are on that.
yeah, so I think the biggest difference I would say is competition. There are a few other flippers that I know in the Pensacola area that are, buying houses and taking them all the way to market, but there aren't a lot. It's not very common. And so our competition is a lot lower. And most of our deals we found on the MLS. There is a small real estate investing community, but just not as much competition for sure. I think the other difference is, the market forces at play, right? So in Pensacola, there's the Naval Air Station and Corey Station, which are both military installments, and there's a lot of military personnel cycling through. And so kind of the economics of that are a little different, right? They're kind of buying a lot of starter homes, and also there's a pretty consistent flow of new buyers.
Yeah, that's a good
You know,
point.
so those are kind of the major differences that I've seen. Um, and obviously there are a few other little things, but
That's
yeah,
actually really smart that you bring that up, because that is a factor that I had never thought about in that area. I mean, we own some real estate out that way as well, and that's like, for the rental aspect, it's really nice, because there's a lot of people renting, but there's a lot of military too that have gotten more into the buying aspect, and you're always having a fresh batch of buyers. It seems like, whether
yeah,
so when you're buying homes, it's not like you're just in a market where you're like, okay, we're gonna kind of wait on the market type of a thing. It's like, no, you have people that are moving there that are needing a place to live, and maybe aren't, necessarily the renter type. They want to own, and they don't necessarily have the time to put work into a home. And so where you are, flipping a lot of these homes, like you're getting buyers regularly for it. So I'm curious, actually, with that, to stay on that point a little bit, do you have a specific home that you're looking for? Like every time you're going for a flip, is it like, man, these are like the main things, like the like main things that I look for to identify a home that I want to flip? Like, is it within a square footage? Is it a bed and bath ratio? Is it obviously location is going to play a part regardless, but I'm more curious about the like dimensions and of the actual house that you identify to flip. What does that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, so we have kind of a template that we try and apply. We love 3 bed, 2 baths around 1,400 square feet is kind of our bread and butter. We've gone a little bit bigger, we've gone a little bit smaller, but we like to stay kind of right in that range. We typically avoid garages, especially like a two-car garage. We've we found that it's not worth. You have to pay more up front usually, and the numbers don't work out where you're making anymore. So we typically buy like no car garage, 3 bed, 2 bath, 1,400 square feet. That's like our bread and butter. And we love block houses. Block houses. So out here a lot of houses are built with cinder blocks, and those are you're not going to run into nearly as many structural problems or foundation problems because they're like bomb shelters basically.
Yeah.
So they may be 60, 70 years old, but they're still fine structurally. So we love those when we see them. So yeah, that's kind of our target.
That's cool.
That's cool, man. And you said you've done a few burrs, right?
So we have done one burr here in Pensacola, and we have that as an Airbnb, and then we have another Airbnb actually in Arizona. But we're looking to do more here. We have one that we're kind of working on. That once it's finished, the plan is to burr it, and that is one of our exit strategies, one of our end games that we want to start employing more. So.
Yeah, I'd be curious to ask. So, when you get a property, are you like planning to burr it from the very beginning, or are you just kind of like looking at the numbers as you go along, or I guess how would your strategy be different when doing a burr versus doing a flip?
Yeah, so the one that we are working on right now that we're going to burr, we planned on burring from the get-go, as well as the first one that we did. Not a whole lot changes between when we're trying to flip it and burr it, but sometimes we do. With the ones that we're going to burr, we might add a little bit more of a personal touch, I guess you could call it. My wife does all of our designs, and we have kind of a set design that we follow on our flips. It's pretty standardized. But on the ones that we're going to keep, we'll add, maybe a little extra flair to the backsplash or something like that. That makes it a little more unique if it's something that we're going to be holding on to. So.
That's nice. Yeah, I've heard that that's like one of the major keys to flippers, like finding success, is having those templates, having something that they're going to follow. Like, hey, we've got one or two outlay, like 2 or 3 outlays or whatever. We're going to choose one of them, and that's what we're doing. Like, that's it. And we don't go outside of that. I didn't care if we were in the tile, section at Home Depot and we saw one that caught our eye. It doesn't matter. We're sticking with the tile that we use, or the LVP, or whatever it may be. Like, this is our template that we follow, our parameters that we stay within, and that's like super keen. I've come to learn that when those are established, the flips go a lot easier. You're able to stay on budget and actually like see it through the way that you're wanting to, or as close as you can.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. And so my wife has a designer's mind. So that's our compromise, is she gets to do a little more personal touch on the ones we're going to keep. I'm very like, let's just make a template, and, if I could just build a factory and cookie cutter out 10 houses, I'd love to do that. But it definitely helps you. Otherwise you're adding extra work. So.
That's awesome. Well, I want to backtrack just a little bit because I do want to dive more into like what you have going on, kind of like we already have. But I'm super curious for people that are wanting to get into real estate. I think it's hard enough to figure out like, man, do I start with flipping? Do I start with wholesaling? Do I just go buy a property and rent it out? What do I do? And for the people that are wanting to do that, a lot of the people that we know are in Utah, and they are probably running into some of the same obstacles that you were, and I'm curious how, if you could kind of walk us through how those conversations went, those early conversations with you and your wife about, like, hey, Utah, it may be the promised land, but not right now for us. Like, maybe we need to consider moving. Like, I'm super curious how those conversations went, what type of things you were weighing out, or if it was just like a, hey, we're just gonna go and do this. Because I think for a lot of people, it is kind of there's that scarcity mindset of like leaving the nest egg, right? Like or leaving the home, and sometimes that can be really detrimental to growth. And so I'm curious, like, what those early stages were like for you and your wife.
Yeah. So I think that obviously everyone's situation is unique. Our situation, we had just gotten married, we didn't have any kids, and we didn't have a whole lot of financial commitments. And so, we were both working jobs. I think I was making like $15 an hour or something when we got married. And obviously, my wife is from Southern Utah. We love Utah. I agree, it is the promised land. And our original plan was not to be gone for very long. But really, my wife brought it up moving first. She brought it up. We were just kind of frustrated. We kept putting in offers and getting outbid, and we were inexperienced. We didn't really know what we were doing. And Utah is like, one of the meccas of real estate investing. So we're going up against these people with connections and money, and we kept striking out. And I think we kind of reached a point where we had this conversation where we were like, well, we either have to wait and we're not going to be able to really do anything in Utah, and we can wait 2 or 3 more years until I graduate, and then figure something out, try and get into real estate investing at that time, or, maybe try and work for someone in the industry and build it up that way, or we've got to move. Like, it's just not going to work where we're at. So, my wife was on board from the get-go. She said, well, maybe we move. Maybe that's the right thing. And I tend to be the more of like the dreamer in our relationship. And so when she gave me the green light to move, I was like, all right, let's do it. So we started looking and settled on Pensacola. But I think that, it's different for everybody, right? I don't know if that's the right move for everyone to move across the country. For us, it was. I had reached a point where I knew that, this is, I think, what I want to do for my career. And it's not a very conventional career path. I'm still going to college online. And my parents had to adjust to the fact that I didn't have my degree yet, but I was already moving across the country. So maybe it's not conventional, but it was what we wanted. And we didn't have as many risks associated with it. Like I said, we don't have kids. We didn't have car payments at the time, anything like that. So it's like we could get by pretty easily. And
do you think
so
that
we're willing to take
moving into a new place like that, like somewhere where you hadn't really been before, do you think that put you guys in like a vulnerable space to like actually accelerate your business? Like, do you feel like that had any effect on you, like being like, okay, like we're here, we've got to make it work, and that's how like you guys have seen the success you've seen? Or was that just something you guys were like, no, we're passionate about this, we're going to figure it out one way or another?
No, I think that definitely helped. I think, like, I'm sure you guys heard the phrase like burning the boats, right? We got into that house and it was kind of like, okay, we bought this thing, and there's really no turning back. Like, we're down this path, and now that we're down it, we might as well take it as far as we can take it. And so I think that definitely helped us. It really kind of sealed the deal in terms of our commitment. And once that went well, I think we were kind of addicted at that point. And, like I said, we only planned on being out here for a year. We've been out here almost 2. And I don't see a reason for us to stop anytime soon, So I think whatever situation people are in, I think there is a kind of leap of faith you have to take. The first real estate deal is going to be scary. It's any amount of real estate is big money, and it's going to be scary making that commitment. But once you do, uh, it's just like a catalyst, right? I think you start once you're on that path, you might as well run as far and as fast as you can, right? So
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, Joe, something that I really like that you said is you're like, yeah, we're just married. We don't have kids. We don't have car payments. Like, we have the opportunity to take risks. And one of the reason why I love connecting with young entrepreneurs in real estate is because they are taking huge risks. And like, it's really cool to see that. And me and my wife talk about this a lot that like, right now, this space of time that we have before we have kids, like, we need to take some risks if we don't want to like live a better life. It's like it's the most opportune time to go big, because I look at like my parents or even people in their 30s and 40s who are a little bit older and they just have more obligations, and they do rely on a paycheck, and for them it would be a lot more riskier if they were to just jump full time into real estate and do big. So I think it's cool, man, to see people like you who just go all out and take risks in this young phase of life, and I think that's super important.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, it reminds me of that saying, Ben, of like, live now like others won't, so later you can live like others can't. And I agree with that 100%. I know for my wife, it was actually really hard for her to move outside of Utah, and I think it still weighs on her. But guess what? Mom and dad still have a relationship with them. We're still alive. We haven't been eaten up, or we're not, no communication. Nothing crazy has happened yet, where it's not like we've disappeared and we don't ever get to see them again or anything. It's all just carried on. And that's cool. That's cool that you're
Yep.
doing that. So,
Joe, I wanted to ask you, obviously the real estate market has changed a lot within the last 2 years, and I've seen a lot of flippers like go out of business and lose money, and a lot of them have W-2 jobs right now. It's just kind of funny, but I just wanted to ask you, how have you like stayed afloat, and how have you adapted, and what changes have you made to be able to continue to have success?
yeah. So I mean, part of it has got to be dumb luck, to be honest with you. I think I'll be the first to admit I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So if what I'm doing is working, half of it is just sheer luck. But I think that when we moved out here, we came with the purpose of being very uh, minimizing our risk as much as we can, right? And so we flip on like the lowest end of the spectrum. We're buying. I've never bought a house that I'm going to flip for over $100,000, and then we usually sell in like the 180 to $200,000 range. And so, um, the market. When we talk about the market, right? It's like this big kind of almost unknowable thing, at least in my eyes. But if you look at it from a local perspective, like I mentioned earlier, we still have a lot of military families coming and going. Most of them are using VA loans, so which is no money down, or FHA loans, right, 3.5% down. So although interest rates have gone up and their payment is higher, it's still about on par with what they would be paying for rent, and they don't
Mhm.
have to put as much down. And so, and a lot of them were squeezed out of the market kind of during the recent boom, right? So there's still a low supply of houses for that kind of demographic here. Like I mentioned earlier, there aren't a lot of flippers out here in our space doing, kind of the same level of flips that we're doing. And so I think really that's been our key to success is we've really minimized our risk. And so, if the market goes down 20%, I'm still profiting. It might not be a ton. I'm not going to be a millionaire off one house, but I'm still in the black. And so I think that when you get into those, more expensive markets and even just more expensive homes, you run the risk of market drops affecting you a lot more because the buyers in that space are usually going to pay attention a lot more to interest rates. And, um, on a $500,000 house, a 1% interest rate increases that payment quite a bit more in terms of actual cash value, right? And so we've seen not a lot of dip in terms of demand. Um, I got to mention a few weeks ago, well, I guess a month ago, we listed a house, and the day before we listed it, I saw an article that said, you won't be able to make money from flipping houses anymore. Basically, like it was a dead strategy, right? And the next day we listed a house, and it went under contract that same day. And that that's not, again, dumb luck, right? But I think that if you're in that kind of space where there are still buyers on that lower end who are squeezed out during the boom, and they have low money options, and they just want a decent house, right? That's where we operate. So
That's awesome. So, you kind of discussed a little bit about how you guys are still flipping and whatnot in this market, and how you've allowed your mindset to just kind of not be affected by that. I want to dive in a little bit into. I know you mentioned earlier that you find a lot of your deals from the MLS. Do you use any other sources right now to like find these deals, or how? What I'm really curious about is your guys' process and system to finding, analyzing, and then obviously you've already discussed your templates, so you already know what's going to go into it, and then your listing. So from point of purchase to point of sale, I want to kind of walk through that. Like, what does that analyzation process look like? What is, when you're finding the deals, how are you finding those deals? What does that kind of look like on your end?
yeah. So the bulk of our deals have come off the MLS. The others, we've done a few through wholesalers. So there are a good amount of wholesalers in the area, and I'm on their emailing lists or their text lists, and they'll send me deals, and we've done a few that way. And really, I so the way I analyze a deal, obviously, we have a calculator, right? We plug in how much we think the rehab is going to cost, purchase price, holding costs. Our time right now holding a property is usually about 6 to 8 months. So I factor in 8 months of holding costs, and then we do comps in the area. I always discount comps 5%, just to be safe. And there are a few areas, that we've kind of X'd out. Like, I know there are not good comps there. I know that those kind of neighborhoods are going to be tough to sell in, no matter how good the house is.
That's interesting. So you'll actually take a comp and you'll discount it 5%, and then use that number to base your guys's your new listing price off of.
Yeah.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Joe, is that because the market's going down, or would you still do that if like the market was going up pretty fast?
I would still do it if the market was going up. I just do it because I've been told and I've experienced there are always surprises in flipping, and I'd always rather it be a good surprise than a bad surprise. So if I get to the end of the road and I can sell the house for 5% more than I thought, that's a good surprise, right? But if I get there and I have to sell it for 5% less, that's a bad surprise. So
Yeah.
I've always just done that kind of just to minimize risk. Helps me sleep a little bit better at night. So we've always done that. And if we like a property right now, the first few houses we did, we used hard money loans, kind of whichever way we could get them. And now we have a few private investors, and we primarily use them. So we'll just reach out. Or I'll reach out to them and say, hey, I've got this deal, send them the numbers. If they like it, they'll agree to it. And then we go from there. We buy the property. And that helps a lot because our offers are considered cash offers. So that, that usually greases the wheels in purchasing the property.
Would you say that's most of your transactions have all been cash? Have you done any flips any other way?
Yeah, so the first one we financed with a primary residence loan, the one that we were living in. And then we did one more. Once we sold that one, we did another one with a primary residence loan.
Was that just like a conventional owner occupancy, or did you get like FHA approval on that, or how like what did that look like?
So the first one was an FHA, and then the second one was a first-time home buyer, like special loan, and so we did 5% down.
Nice.
And if I'm being honest with you, I'm not really sure how we qualified for that, but we did, and we made it
Don't ask
work. But
questions,
other than
right?
that, all
Once the bank gives you the green light, you're like, yeah, that sounds good.
they, they 5% down, and I did, yeah, I stopped asking. So, but yeah, since then they've all been hard money or private investors, which are typically considered cash. So, yeah.
Nice.
How do you come in contact with private investors? Like that's always kind of the bottleneck to take down deals.
Yeah. So pretty much word of mouth has been the only way I've come in contact with private investors. I've met a few people out here in Pensacola that have, that were either pretty much all of them are already in real estate investing, right? And so they hear about what I'm doing, and it kind of works itself out from there. And then there are a few people back in Utah. Um, I'll have people connect me with, people. Um, so yeah, really just word of mouth. I haven't done a whole lot of, once you get into like advertising for private investors, there's a little bit more that goes into that legally and how that works in terms of like accredited investors. And so I haven't really dove into that pool yet. So yeah, pretty much just word of mouth.
And do you have like a set ROI that you like offer on yours, or do you negotiate that whenever you have somebody approach you, or you approach somebody else, or are you typically pitching like, hey, these are the percent like I'm gonna be able to return you within 6 to 8 months or whatever it is? Because correct me if I'm wrong, you said you typically hold from 6 to 8 months, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then do you just have like a specific ROI that you pitch?
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll send them the numbers on the house, and I'll include a preset ROI on that for them and kind of break it down. Typically I do interest only payments each month. When it's set up that way, it just looks a little cleaner, right? You're getting a monthly check. Um, and so I'll send them a number on that. And, if they want to negotiate, I mean, I'm not gonna, if it makes sense for the deal, it makes sense for the deal. It's kind of my approach to it. So I've had a few people, come back to me and say, hey, I want to do it, but I need, maybe 1% more or 2% more. And depending on the deal, sometimes I've had to say, I can't do that on this one. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Um,
Can
but
I ask?
typically I'll just give them a number to start.
Can I ask? Because that's actually a really good point that you bring that up. And I'm sure it's different per market, right? But for people that are wanting to get into flips and maybe have people that have said, "Hey, I'll help you with your first one" or whatever, what's a decent or like, what is that number for you? Like, what number is your go-to number? And I'm sure it is different per deal, but if you had to average it out and say, "Hey, this is a number that I like to," pitch to investors that I can get them on ROI. I think that would be super helpful. I mean, for anybody that's looking to flip and utilize private money or whatever, a good starting base for them. What is that for you?
Yeah, so it's changed over time, right? When interest rates were lower, typically I would pitch 10%. At that time, I was getting about 9% on hard money loans. So basically, I would show that to my investors and say, I'm willing to, pay an extra percent for kind of the ease of dealing with a
Yeah.
person rather than institution, right? Now, it's typically about 12%, just because interest rates have gone up. And so, yeah, I think I'm trying to think. I think pretty much all my deals right now are at 12, are right at that 12%. So, and that obviously it does vary, market to market. The 12% number is nice. It provides them, a pretty good, depending on the deal we do, they're bringing in about 13 to 1500 a month on interest payments. So that's a pretty good monthly
That's
check.
awesome.
Usually more than an average rental, right? So yeah,
Well,
that's kind
well,
of
and
where we're at now.
I can attest to the word of mouth because, quick funny story. That's how we came in touch, right, Joe? Was through Tanner.
Uh-huh.
Tanner
Yeah.
put us in touch, and I believe Tanner has lended you money before, right, on deals, or he's invested with you before
Uh-huh.
on deals. And since then, you guys have like worked on a couple other projects, or you're starting to work on some other projects, right?
Yeah, Tanner's an idea guy. He's got a million ideas, and pretty much 99% of them are good.
Yeah.
So I just try and latch on to as many of them as I can. But yeah, that's how we came in contact, and that's I think the best way to grow your base, right? Is if you connect with the right people, they connect you with other people, right? You hope that everybody, when they think of someone that can benefit from the relationship, will connect you, right? And you kind of do vice versa, and everybody's happy. So
That's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Joe, wh- what are some of your biggest struggles and defeats that you've seen flipping, and how have you been able to overcome them?
yeah, so I think in flipping itself, the hardest thing for me has always been to find good contractors, good workers. Um, you're really in real estate investing at large, but especially in flipping, you're just really dependent on people, right? Whether it's your investors or the contractors or buyers. And so people are sometimes fickle, and learning to deal with the ups and downs of other people's decisions. For me, with dealing with contractors, I ended up just deciding that I was going to hire full-time employees and kind of create more accountability that way. And so that's worked out for me, kind of separating myself from, having to find, pay, when it's not their own company, they don't care as much, right? And so
Yeah.
that's been hard. I think too, there's always just moments of doubt, right? I remember the first flip that we did. It took us 4 months, and then we went on to the next one, and that one took us it took us 2 months to find one, and then another like 5, 6 months to flip it. So we looked back on our first year and we're like, oh, we've only done like 2 houses. That feels really small. But now, growth is exponential, right? So in our second year, we've done so far 5 houses. And
Wow.
so I think recognizing that growth is exponential, and you have to understand that you're kind of investing in the future, right? Those first early stages, and still even now, right? It's hard sometimes. You wish you were doing more, but you just recognize that it's gonna all build over time, right? So
Yeah, that's awesome. There's a book, I forget who it's by, but it's called The E-Myth, and it talks about, working on your business rather than working in your business. And it sounds like you've been able to somewhat create that separation. I'm curious on these flips that you're doing. How did you go about finding some of these crews and these subcontractors? And what is the workload ratio? Like, are you guys still in there putting sweat equity in and working in them? Or have you gotten to the point where you're more taking that project, management role of like, hey, I'm making sure and facilitating all these different duties and making sure they're getting done?
yeah, so the way that we found most of construction is very much word of mouth, right? You go to Lowe's, you see someone, and you ask them if they're in the plumbing aisle and they look like they know what they're doing. You say, "Hey, are you a plumber?" And 99% of the time they are.
Have
So
you found
that's
people
how
like
I
that?
found
Oh my gosh.
yeah, yeah, and
That's funny.
it sounds crazy, but it also kind of makes sense, right? I mean, you associate yourself in those circles, and contractors know other contractors, so you ask them who they know. And then we honestly have used Facebook a lot. There's like contractor groups for our area, and I'll just post on there and say, "Hey, I've got this job. I'm looking for someone to do X, Y, and Z," and I'll have people reach out to me that way. Um, the employees I found basically were just contractors that did a good job. And being a contractor it can be a tough sled. It can be a lot of work, and so I've found that a lot of times if they can get to a more steady income, they want that. So I have two employees right now, and both of them, well, one of them just was doing work for me as a contractor, and I just said, hey, you're great. Why don't I just pay you what I'm paying you as a contractor, basically, but just make it a full time thing? And he ended up coming on, and then the second guy I have was actually word of mouth from someone. He had just lost his job, and someone reached out to me, and he ended up being really great working out for us. So, uh, yeah, it's just kind of you just got to put as many lines in the water as you can, right? We don't do a ton of I don't do a ton of work myself anymore. At this point, it's mostly managing, and we still, I'm not licensed in everything, so I have to sub a lot of things out still. Not a lot, but kind of the big major things, right?
Yeah.
Uh, you have to have someone licensed to them. So I manage those relationships and then manage my two employees. And um, I'll get my hands dirty every once in a while, but for the most part, it's QuickBooks and Google Sheets and stuff like that. So
That's awesome that you've been able to do that because I've mentioned this before, but I find myself in that terrible rut of being like, "Ah, I'll just do it. I'll just do it. I can get it done quicker. I can get it done better. I can whatever." And whether that's the case or not, my brain just naturally turns to that, and I think it's just because that's the way I was raised. Just take, do it yourself, man. Just figure it out, kind of a thing. And
Mhm.
and I'm glad because I've been able to get a lot of projects done that way. I've been able to see success that way. I've learned a lot. I've gained a lot of skills and trades, but the one thing that I need to do better in is learn how to delegate and trust and network and do those things. And it's funny you say that because on one of my buildings that I have out in Florida, I have a tenant who doesn't even speak English, and my Spanish is as broken as it can be. And so sometimes I'll call Ben and I'll be like, "Hey, get on this call for me. This is what I need." So I'm facilitating that out, right? I'm delegating to Ben. No, but I use
Yeah.
Translate a lot, right? And he's awesome. And I've started to branch out and like I'm actually going to assign him to one of my other buildings to work on some like tile work that I need done. I mean, I flew out there a couple weeks ago and I was freaking tiling an entire unit, and I was like, wow, like I have gained respect for people that do this work because for the freaking 6 days I was there, dude, every day I was like, man, this is breaking me down. And not even that. The biggest thing, Joe, is it took me away from like my other main source of income. I wasn't able to go look and find deals. I wasn't able to sell solar, and I actually lost more money than I did saving money doing it myself. And that was like a major learning experience for me. And so that's really neat that you've been able to hone in on that and figure that down and just man, that's impressive. Really cool. So
Yeah. Yeah, my father-in-law told me one time, every time you put on the tool belt, you lose money. So it's always usually more cost effective to find someone else to do that.
it was great
So
advice.
I've been trying
yeah,
to tell Jordan for a long time.
yeah. Good
He
for his
wants me to
math.
move to Mexico. He wants me to sit there and go live like he did for 2 years and just figure it out. I'm like, dude, come on. I got you on payroll, man. I bought him lunch the other day. I mean, come on.
Yeah, there you go.
So Joe, just kind of wrapping up, what does the big vision for you look like? Are you trying to build a huge flipping company? Or are you eventually trying to develop or trying to buy a bunch of rentals, or what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our end game, our first end game is rentals. So we have a 7-year plan in place, and flipping is kind of the means to the end in burring, and eventually, yeah, we want to get into developing actually, um, and build our rental portfolio that way. So we have a plan in place, and sometimes I have to remind myself that like flipping, I could go try and build the biggest flipping company that's ever been, and that might be fun. But really, it's a means to an end. I want to get into to more and more rentals and have more of my income shift towards that. So yeah, that's our end game is rentals and flipping to them and eventually developing to them. So
It sounds pretty. It sounds like you're on like the right track to do so because you've started to do a lot more burrs, right? And for people that aren't familiar with that term, the buying a property, rehabbing the property, renting the property out, refinancing the property, and it sounds like you've been able to already do that on one or two, and you're looking to do that on some of these other ones, and so that's really cool that you've been able to do that. And the best thing about it too is the whole refinance. That's like that last R. I think it's the last R that I like in the BRRRR is that refinance, because all that cash that you get out from that is untaxed, right? You buy a property for $100,000, you put 30 into it, it appraises for 200,000, and you loan, what is it, 75? Do they typically loan 75% of the appraised value? Is that what it is?
yeah, so it'll vary from 70% to 80% depending on
So
your credit.
you're able to pull back, 150,000 or whatever it is, 75 to 80%, and it's like, awesome, I've got that liquid back. I still own the property. The tenant's paying the note on it, and I've got my capital, and none of it's taxed.
Yep.
The tax man doesn't stick his hands in it at all. So that's really cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, Joe, I'm super grateful to have you on, man. I'd love for you to just kind of share with us what you're doing right now on a day-to-day to just stay sharp in your business. Is it reading books? Is it podcasts? What is it that you do right now to stay sharp in your business and at the top of your game?
Yeah. So I would say books. I do a lot of Audible. I'm always trying to have at least one real estate Audible book going. I spend a lot of time. Right now we have 4 properties going, and so I kind of bounce between them. Making sure people are on top of things and stuff like that. So I spend a lot of time in my truck and walking properties and going into Lowe's, and so I always try and have like a real estate book going in the background. I also think that I try and I'm always checking on the market, right? Even if I'm not looking to buy a property, I'm looking at what is out there and kind of running analysis on them, just to keep those skills sharp and also kind of stay current with trends, right? I also really try and focus on what I'm doing. So the real estate books I'm listening to are really focused on, flipping, burring, and eventually developing or syndication type things, because those are the areas that I'm going to be operating in. I think that's kind of the hardest thing about learning in real estate is there's a lot of different avenues you can go down and a lot of shiny objects to chase, and it's really easy to get pulled in a dozen different directions. So I've really tried to regiment myself on the aspects of real estate investing that I'm involved in and staying educated on those.
Awesome. That's cool. Well, do you have any major advice you'd give to somebody that's just looking to get right into real estate before we wrap up? Any one-liners, anything that you'd say to anybody that's wanting to just really start flipping or just get into real estate or take a chance? If you had to talk to your young self coming off a mission, freshly married, 2, 3, 4 years ago, wherever it was, what would be your main piece of advice you'd give to them?
Yeah, I think I would have to steal from Nike and say, just do it. I think as soon as you start trying, that is when you're going to actually start learning, right? I failed on acquiring the first probably 30 properties I offered on. And people who haven't offered on a property yet, I was shocked by how many things I didn't know of what it went into a successful offer, right? And so I would just say, just do it. Just start doing it. Start putting in offers. Start trying to get funding. Once you start the process, then you start to know what you don't know, right? You start to figure out your gaps of knowledge. So
that's awesome.
Just get going
That's
on
awesome, dude.
Well, Joe, thanks for being on here, man.
So, Joe, for any of the
thanks.
listeners that want to follow you, where can we find you?
That's a good question. So I don't have an Instagram. I have a Facebook. I don't really get on there very much. I do have a LinkedIn. It's
There
Joseph
we go.
Willis. Willis is spelled Illes. You can hit me up on there. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not super active on there. I don't even know if it's updated, but I do get on there occasionally. Or my email, Joe at seasiderflipping.com. I'll always respond to that. So
Nice.
Awesome. Joe, you're the man. Appreciate you, dude. Looking
Thanks,
forward
Joe.
to doing some deals with you in the future.
yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. It was a blast.
Bye-bye.